as we see in Genesis 2:18. And in 2:18 it says, let's see, it is not God that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him. So God made woman and brought her to man. And then when Adam saw the woman, he said in Genesis 2:23, this is now the bone of my bones and the flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. So there you go.
Now man puts on a woman, the Bible says too.
So there's where marriage basically was first instituted right from the beginning. Now during the Old Testament times, they had the Mosaic Law, the legislational part. And, you know, the Israelites followed the Mosaic Law for their marriages. And in the Mosaic Law, it was God's desire for his people marrying within the body of believers. And during that time, no Israelite could marry a Canaanite. They refused to do that because the reason why is because if they married somebody of another belief, that probably the spouse would take on what that person believes. And you can find that in Exodus 34, 10,
Water runs
17.
downhill.
Huh?
I said, water runs downhill.
Exodus 34 what?
You can find part of that in Exodus 34, 10 through 17 and Deuteronomy 7, 3 through 4. And then with Paul in 2 Corinthians 6:14, I did a lot of research, as you can tell. I spent some time with this week. In 2 Corinthians 6:14, Paul also commanded the members of the church of Corinth, do not unequally yoke together with the unbelievers. And like it says, there are reasons for that, as it said in the other part, is that sometimes when we do that, we'll take on the other person's religion or whatever. And maybe it's not.
Water runs downhill, number one,
Solomon was a
number.
good example.
Ellen
there.
White, yes, and he married
Solomon taken,
He married an unbeliever with the ideal that he was going to
one was
convert
converted.
her, and she was converted. She
Yeah,
did
she
become
was
a
converted,
Christian,
yeah.
but she said that he set an example for all of his people, an excuse for them to go and marry pagans, and their spouses didn't all become converted. So he set a bad precedence, even though God in his mercy, was able to reach this lady. He set a bad example. Oh, well, Solomon did it, and he's smarter than me. It's okay.
Do you ever think about why God let, like when the Israelis left Egypt, there was about a million non-Jewish people that joined their band?
Yeah.
Yes, they came along.
There's a lot of,
And they became Jews.
Yeah.
Essentially,
Yeah.
they became Jews. And you got Rahab
Yeah.
and all her
And I'm
family.
going to tell you a little bit about that too.
Excellent.
Yeah, there's a part in there, not about Rahab, but there is a certain part in it. Now, the Israelites, their marriages were directed by the Mosaic Law, and it's strictly by the Mosaic Law. And daughters, back then, inherited their father's possession. And so...
if there is no sons.
Right, that's right. And so they had to marry within the tribe, or lose their inheritance.
Oh, yeah. The land.
And in Numbers 27:8 and 36:2-4, you'll find that. Choosing a bride. Then choosing a bride in the Old Testament, the parents chose the bride. So, do we do that now? In some places they do that still.
Some of the Jewish
I'm
people
working on
still.
Well, some of us do. I mean, some of us do try to do it, but we find out that our kids have their own mind, of course. But during that time, the parents did consult their children
Yeah.
so often because, like with
They would choose to know
Isaac
about their
and
parents.
Rebecca,
Not
they did ask her, if she
Yeah.
Yeah,
She was willing.
If she was willing to marry him.
consent,
What amazed me, he was willing.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't know what she looked like or anything
Mhm.
else.
but he was willing to do what his
God
dad
knew.
said, and he was never sorry for that.
Right.
You know?
And then Samson was the other one
He wasn't.
he decided, he demanded.
Yeah, he didn't want it.
basically demanded.
He didn't
His
want to do
parents
it.
were totally against it, but they went on ahead with
Yeah.
the marriage. Let's see, and in the Old Testament, people married at a young age. At a very young age.
How young?
Well, it doesn't say, but it says in the New Testament, and this can tell you maybe it was younger than what they say in the New Testament, because they established a minimum age for marriage for the boys to be 13 and the girls to be 12.
This isn't in the Bible, though.
Hmm?
This isn't in the Bible.
This is during the New Testament times, the Jewish leaders.
Oh.
The Jewish leaders had a minimum
This is the
age.
Torah.
I did some research on
Oh.
this, and they said they finally established an age
Mhm.
of boys being 13 and the
Wow.
girls being 12.
That's
That's the minimum, that's the minimum.
that's because the boy would go through his, what do they call that?
Bar mitzvah.
Bar mitzvah, and at that point, he's considered a man.
Man, that's
There's
correct.
also, which surprised me, there's also certainly for girls,
Yeah.
it's bar something, but
Yeah.
the wording's a little different. I've only heard it once in my life, but they also go through a service or ceremony to
Yeah.
make them,
Becoming a woman.
Yeah.
Mhm.
doesn't surprise me.
And, of course, when they were married, the wife, of course, left her family, and the husband did not leave his.
Actually, the Bible commanded the man to leave his
Well, they became a
father
part
and
of,
his wife.
back then in the
His
Old
father and his
Testament,
mother.
in the Old Testament time, yeah, they were considered one flesh, but they were still part of that tribe, and still the father was a head. The father was still a head of
But
the tribe.
the man is told, the command is given, a man shall leave his father and mother. Never said anywhere in the Bible that a woman should leave her father and mother. It says a man should leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh.
Well,
Interesting.
I did some research on that, and it
Doesn't mean
does
that was
say
the custom.
they do become one flesh. It says, but the couple still remained under the authority of the bridegroom's father. The parents chose someone that would, it said the parents chose someone that would best fit their clan, which would get along with the mother-in-law and the sister-in-law.
This is why you got so many mother-in-law jokes today, because you're not doing that.
Well, wouldn't that be like Jacob under Laban?
Yes, 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 and he stayed.
Yes, he
Yes,
did.
yes, Jacob,
And put up with the abuse
yes.
for two women.
Well, if you were
Actually,
13
for
years
one,
old,
just
Well, he
for the
did.
long
He
You
was
were
term.
probably.
it'd be kind of hard to go out on your own, even in
Yeah.
them times.
And the father is probably
Less
already
so in
gained a
those
lot of
times.
wealth and a lot of servants and all that, so you probably, and probably the son will probably inherit all that after the father dies. And that's probably how that worked out. Romance in the Old Testament times, there was very little of it. I mean, it wasn't unknown, it did happen, but it did not play a major role, it played a very
Yeah.
minor role.
Yeah.
Like, you go out and have a date or whatever, played a very minor role.
It's interesting though, I think of two people who right off that lived with their in-laws for a long time after they got married, and one was Moses and the other was Jacob, who both lived, and they stayed with the wife's family, and you never hear about Moses' relationship. After his mother has him in the bulrushes, you never hear about her or his dad again in the Bible, not once, but you hear a lot about his father-in-law, so
Wow.
evidently he was very, very close to his wife's family. I thought that's interesting.
The
Jethro.
reason why Roman
Yeah,
has
Jethro,
such
or Ruel.
a small role is because it's not reality.
That, and also, they picked up the bride for the,
Everybody
basically,
thinks-
sometimes they just met on that day. and
Everybody
that
thinks
was
marriage
it.
is nothing but romance and everything else, it's not true.
Probably your most romantic one would be me anyway, would be Esther
Yes.
Yeah.
and what's his name, Boaz?
But it's,
And the-
Esther and Boaz? I mean, Ruth
No,
and Boaz.
Ruth, that's it.
Oh, yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Esther wasn't very
Me going
romantic.
No,
along.
that was beauty contest, remember that?
Yeah.
But it was kind of neat. And the older I get, of course, the better it sounds. In
Mhm.
fact, the young girl picked up the old guy, yeah.
And one thing that,
No, it wasn't the young girl, it was her mother-in-law.
the
No, I
one
meant
thing
to,
that
remember she
they,
came out to shoot by his, yeah, anyway.
the one thing that they said about the love part, the romance part, was that they did not marry the person they loved. They loved the person they married. So love began at marriage.
Love is a principle, not a feeling.
And like in Genesis 24:67, it says when Isaac and Rebekah were married, it says she became his wife and he
And he
loved
loved
her.
her after, yes.
Now the marriage customs back then, they're a little bit different than now. It was a big thing. The marriage was a very, very big thing.
Because it was forever.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes. During the Old Testament times, the father of the girl and the father of the bride decided on a payment. And they would pay the father of the bride. Or, and if they didn't do the payment, like with Jacob, it would be like services. But services can you provide to, of course, you know, Jacob for 7 years.
Ellen White said that wasn't so much selling the daughter as that was the father's way of
Yeah,
making sure that
sure
his
that
daughter
yes.
was provided
Yeah.
for, that the man made enough so that if he died, that dowry that he bought her with, quote, bought her, wasn't a real buy like a slave kind of thing, but that dowry was in her hands to be used for her support if anything
Right.
happened to him.
Right.
It's a
And
good idea.
so it would either be the payment or services, like with Jacob. And it says the length of the engagement varied. It could be sometimes the couple married, had the engagement and then married the same day, engaged married. And some, it would be longer. The engagement would be a little bit longer. It could even go up to a year. John and I, our engagement was a year. I don't know about anybody else's. You said 3 months, right?
Put it
I
that
made it
way.
about 5,
How
A
long
little
did
less
yours?
than a year.
A little less than a year?
Ours
One of
was
which
2
was in
weeks after we
service.
decided.
Anybody else?
I was 33, I was sure.
We dated a year, but we only were.
Well, I knew John off and on since I was 16, but our engagement was
And-
off and on.
And that was a deferment to my in-laws, who insisted on a year.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Okay. On the day of the wedding, now this is part of the wedding part. On the day of the wedding, the groom and his friends dressed in their finest clothes, and it was really just decked them. I mean, like how we do now, we deck themselves
Yeah.
out for a wedding. And then they went to the bride's home. And then they would go, after they go get the bride, they'd go back to the groom's house, and the friends would sing and dance all the way back behind the groom and the bride, all the way back to the groom's house. And it says once they reach the groom's house, you guys are gonna really love this one. Once they went back to the groom's house, the couple was ushered into the bridal chamber. Okay, the marriage was consummated through sexual union as the guests waited outside. Now, how many of you went through that? How many guests were waiting outside? So that was the thing back then. Now, would you like people standing outside your door?
Is this where the custom of eloping came from?
Yeah.
Talk about pressure.
Oh, boy.
So anyways, okay, once, of course, then after that all happened, it says it was announced. It was announced, they went out, they announced, and the wedding went on for a total of a week, the wedding celebration. So you can see the wedding day is a very, very big thing
Went on
back
for a
then.
week?
Went
That's a
on
party.
for a week.
That's
That's
why,
how
that's why they did the consummation at the beginning, because they didn't want to wait a week.
It also points out the falsity of thinking that Jesus took water and transformed it into booze as opposed to grape juice. Because if you had a wedding that lasted for a week with people drinking continually, by the end of it,
It'd be pretty ripped.
that'd be
Yeah.
another reason for doing things at the beginning.
yeah.
Because at the end of it, everybody would be totally wasted. It'd be I mean, you're either describing an orgy or a wedding, one or the other.
Yeah.
Obviously, they couldn't have been drinking alcoholic beverage
Let's see,
heavily
which one
for
is my
7
wife?
days. They've been
Yeah, right.
total.
Not a good example
You
is
don't know
how
if
you
you're
have
alcoholic, so-
weddings like that now, and they all drink, and it's usually a 4 to 6 day parties.
Which is that?
The Italians,
Oh, the Italian.
4 to 6
and also some of the
Party.
mid-eastern people have a 3 to 5 day wedding,
Mm-hmm.
and they all drink.
This isn't that one,
Yeah.
yeah,
Ooh.
a friend of ours.
And they're
there
not
was,
all
uh,
wasted.
She lives over in Saudi Arabia,
Well,
John's friend.
Maybe it's
and-
capacity.
You
and
build
they
up a
went through
tolerance
long,
for alcohol.
That's true,
wedding thing, right?
that's true, yeah.
But y'all
His
get
aunt in Saudi Arabia, they went through a long celebration for their wedding. Of course, in separate quarters, but went through a long women, men, separate. It was quite an ordeal.
Did the Jews change? I heard a thing on the marriage of two Hasidic Jews and their big party, like the husband-to-be and wife, they were with their friends for 24 hours before the wedding. They didn't sleep. They partied. Also, it was an arranged marriage. They flew, one was in New York, one's California. They flew in to talk to each other. I don't know, I imagine they had less than 10 hours talking to each other before they decided to marry one another. And then they had the wedding and there was no contact. He couldn't even see her the day of the wedding. That's why he was in another place and they were partying with his friends, and then she was partying with her friends, and when they saw each other is when they took her back. But they didn't say much about
That
what
was
happened
recently?
afterward. Yeah, every now and then I hear Dr. Laura, and she
Okay.
has some, she's Jewish, and she has some Hasidic Jewish friends, and that's these people. Everything's arranged, everything's taken care of by the parents.
Well, I do know that they still do some of that, in different religions, they do go ahead and take off the bride for the groomsmen, yeah.
Oh, when I was young, my uncle lived up in Palos Verdes, and he had a friend that was a rich Italian. I don't think he was religious, but he got wives for all of his sons from Italy. And my uncle asked him, how do the kids put up with it? He said, well, they either put up with it or get disinherited.
In the New Testament teaching about marriage, says most marriage teaching in the New Testament came from Jesus and the Apostle Paul in the Corinthians. And you had mentioned about the thing where Jesus went to the wedding and turned that was one of the other things. Well, he basically gave his blessing to that marriage right there.
Yeah, if you take the Buddha's view of the wedding, we're kind of left in a quandary because we get Mary coming to Jesus and saying, we got to do something, they're all going to be sober. Right? They're running out of wine, and he says, no problem, here's the, we'll keep them drunk. And that's what it translates into, is what I'm saying.
But he did give his blessing to that marriage, basically. And then on one other occasion, Jesus was asked about marriage and divorce, and he quoted two passages from Genesis. Have you not read that he who made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man shall leave her father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So then they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore what God has joined together, let no man separate. So that was from Genesis 1:7 to 4, 5 through and here from 19, 46. And there was another thing, in Paul, there were several issues that he had brought up, but one in particular I'm going to kind of stick with, because we know a lot of people who have married people that do not belong to the Seventh-day Adventist Church or are non-believing. And I have family of my own the same way. I have an aunt that has gone to church without my uncle for many, many years. But this was one of the things that Paul had talked about. It says in one, one in particular was a Christian whose spouse was an unbeliever. Paul, this is what he reasoned. Paul reasoned that if an unbelieving partner is willing to live with the Christian, then the Christian should not dissolve the marriage. there are some people that say, my husband or my wife is, not following, and I've heard this on Dr. Rohr, should I just, just drop the whole thing and just annul the marriage, let it be at that. And he says here that staying with an unbelieving partner could result his or her salvation.
Yeah.
And like I was telling you, I do have an uncle that hasn't gone to church for years, and he's starting to go again with my aunt. So, there's signs, and it does happen. And I know in the Old Testament it did say something about not, do not marry unbelievers. But sometimes we get involved sometimes, and I take it this happened in that you've kind of fallen away yourself, and then you come back, but you've married somebody already, but you've come back to become a Christian.
Who married a Christian, but their husbands or wives decided after they were married that they didn't want to be Christian anymore, so it wasn't that they,
Yeah,
you
and that
know, so
happens
you
too.
don't know. But Ellen White says something about if you marry, if you married an unbeliever when you were an unbeliever or whatever, or supposing you were a believer, whatever, you made a mistake and you did something wrong, you should never ever say that the marriage was a mistake, because that gives you, it gives you a bad,
It starts the ball
it
rolling.
starts a bad thing.
Yes, it
What do we
does.
say? And she said that God could still bless, then you have to work with where you're at.
But where he said that is in 1 Corinthians 14 in regards to staying with your partner.
But we talked about it earlier, not to be unequally yoked. A person shouldn't really go after someone that's
No.
unequally yoked.
Especially if you're a Christian at the time.
Right.
Right.
And there's a lot of people that get married, oh, I'm so great, when I marry him, I'll make him a Christian.
Yeah,
That never happens.
doesn't work.
No.
And there was someone in my Jan's church
Exception.
that she stayed with her husband for 45 years, and then he left her.
Right.
And he never
Well, you do
became
hear
a
that too. You hear a lot of
Yeah.
that anymore. It's like they've been together for so
A lot
many
of
years,
times
and then all of
they
a
do.
sudden,
Right.
And then
something
you
happens.
hear other people, like one of Jan's ex-ministers met his wife down at that place in Long Beach that's out of business now, and the Pike, and got married a week later, and they've been married forever,
Yeah,
so.
amazing, yeah.
But we all have our ups and downs in marriage. I mean, that's just a given. You have your ups and you have your downs. Sometimes we have more downs than we have ups.
Nowadays,
But,
most people just encourage you to divorce your spouse if you say that they do something that somebody else disagrees with. And it just amazes me the number of people nowadays will say, well, your spouse does such and such, or your spouse, well, leave them, leave
Yeah, it's
her.
too quick to get,
Man, what do you put up with that for?
The
I'm
old,
just astounded at the number of people that have that idea, that's what marriage
The
is
old
about, it's not
rabbis.
marriage.
yeah.
the old
They take it
rabbis
for
did the
granted.
same thing.
Pardon?
The old rabbis.
Yeah, they did that too,
They did
yeah.
they
Oh,
said,
no.
they said you could write a thing that divorcement
Yeah.
if
You
she
don't
burned
like
your
her?
breakfast.
Yeah,
Your wife burned your breakfast, you
Yeah.
could divorce her. I mean,
Yeah.
the Jewish people were doing the same thing.
Yeah, it's
yeah.
because the hardness of
But
the
that
heart's
wasn't
not
God's
allowed
ideal, that's
Moses
not the
to
Christian
get
ideal of
divorced.
marriage.
But I think marriage, in a sense,
Yeah,
gives
didn't
us what
intend it.
Christ does go through with us.
He didn't intend sin either.
When we give up on our marriage,
No,
it's
he
like,
Yeah.
Christ doesn't give up on us. I mean, if he gave up on us, then
Right.
what would happen?
In fact, he
So-
refers to, what Jim was talking about, he refers to it saying that, he says that, you said that a man may offer his wife a bill of divorcement and be done with her. He said, but this was not so from the beginning.
Yeah.
Right.
This was not the way God intended it. This is something you've done.
That's-
What did he say, I hate divorce? Did he come out and say, I hate
He
divorce?
said, yeah, he said he hates, what's
God said he hates divorce, but he also said he was going to
Putting
divorce
away.
his people at one point in the Old Testament. So, there's some,
Well, they're
Because
unfaithful.
they were
It doesn't
the
have to be
adults.
divorce for
and
that.
also he
Adults.
told Moses,
That's grounds
let's
for.
get.
Oh, putting
no,
away.
no,
I hate
actually,
putting
no,
away.
adultery is supposed to be.
No, that's what I meant.
But,
That's what they were doing,
Well, that's why,
basically,
yeah.
spiritual adultery.
He said he would divorce them because
He
they're
al-
harlots.
he also told Moses, these are two stiff-necked people, I'll wipe them out, and we'll start over.
It was a test.
Well, I think part of that was testing Moses
Yeah, it was a
too.
test to
I think
see.
part of
It was,
testing
although
Moses.
it's-
Remember one thing, God can't lie.
Yeah, inspiration says that even though he had the right man there for it, and even though it was a personal test for Moses, but if Moses had said, okay, let's do it, God was not bluffing.
He can't
Yeah,
lie, but he
oh,
has the power of
He doesn't
choice.
bluff.
No, God can't lie.
He can't lie, but he has the power of choice.
Yes, he does.
If you're saying something, knowing you're gonna reverse it, that's a lie,
Right.
period.
Well, I don't think he's gonna reverse anything. What he says goes.
Well, you have to
He
be
gives us a
careful.
chance to make changes
You have
though.
to
He
be careful
does
with
give
that
us-
because he
Yeah.
told
There,
Jonah.
John made a very good point. He does give us a chance to make changes.
Yeah, he told Jonah to prophesy that Nineveh was gonna be destroyed in 40 days, and that came straight from God.
Yeah.
And so God, he says things, they're conditional, it's not, well,
He
you know,
can't change
I
his
lied,
mind.
I lied.
He-
Power of
By
choice.
saying that I was gonna destroy you, I'm not
In
really.
fact, God sent
So you
Jonah.
Didn't he want Nineveh to turn around?
Yeah,
That's the
Jonah-
bottom line.
But
So you think God's big into lying, so?
No.
You know, there was some Christians a while that witnessed, they would find non-Christians and go to bed with them if they said they would accept Jesus. You think that's right?
Jim,
No.
That's human devising.
hey Jim,
Yes.
I know it won't work with this illustration might work with your kids, but many times I've been saying, I've driven down the road, not now when my kids are angels now, but I said, I'll pull the car over. And they knew I would pull the car over. I'll pull over if you don't straighten up, I'll pull over.
Yeah.
And in the school setting, administrators, teachers, all the time Sharon and I say, if this doesn't happen, we will do this.
We have to go through with it if they do not.
Yeah, and we follow through, but often we reverse, and that's what we want in the beginning. We just want them to
They
change.
give us no choice but to do that.
Right.
John.
But,
But-
go ahead.
But also what Jonah said was not a tautology.
Wasn't what?
It wasn't a truism that if this, it said that you go and tell the people if they don't repent, the city will be
That's not what
destroyed.
I read, it just said, tell the people of Nineveh in 40 days, Nineveh will be destroyed, there was no if. But at any rate,
Yeah, but the whole point is,
Distracting.
couldn't God have destroyed Nineveh without sending Jonah?
Yeah.
right.
He sent Jonah.
right.
He needed Nineveh, he needed
What
Jonah.
he's telling Nineveh is, this is the point you're moving toward.
Yeah.
Right.
And he sent Jonah to tell them this is the point you're moving toward, so they wouldn't reach the point where he had to
Yes.
destroy them, where they would turn before they
It's a
died.
warning.
What was it Jesus says, how often would a God be delivered of my wings, like a hen gathers her children, and you would not do that. That's what he's trying to do,
Yeah.
always.
And that's, in marriage, we have to look at how we need to start, when there's an opportunity to start changing, take it. Paul showed how marriage
Education
relation,
opportunity too.
yeah, Paul showed how a marriage relation can best function. First, he said, wives submit to your husbands as to the Lord, Ephesians 5:22. The model for the wife's submission is the church, which is subject to Christ, Ephesians 5:24. And then second, husbands are to love their wives. The role that the husband plays is outlined by Jesus Christ, who, his bride the church, so much that who loved his bride so much, the church, so much that he gave his life for her. So, in a sense, that's how we can best
That's
make
the
a marriage
idea,
work.
yeah.
Mhm. That's the whole idea. If we look at that, things can really work.
Yeah, I just been impressed more and more, if you look at worldly marriages, they don't work, there's no submission by the wife, and of course the husband wouldn't give his life for his wife, much less hardly a piece of bread so many times, you know, but God says, this is my ideal, it's a self-sacrificing
Best
thing
idea.
for both, and it makes the happiest life. It makes the happiest relations.
And it's unfortunate that some people take those verses out of context, like husbands,
You know-
your wife
Yeah.
submit to your husband.
Yeah.
I think it's,
When God spoke to
I'm
Moses-
feeling over you.
Do what I say, yeah.
Remember the wives submit yourselves, and wives remember that as Christ loved the church.
Did you say something, Ken?
I was just thinking, when God spoke to Moses, and he told him, I want you to go talk to Pharaoh. And Moses said, how can I do that? I have no army to back me up. I have nothing. And God said, well, what is that you have in your hand? And Moses said, this is a shepherd's, this is a staff. Some of us carry a staff called circumstantiality because we have no other choice available. It was taken away from us a long time ago.
It's a good illustration that God will
There's
work
no
with
other
use whatever you
choice.
got to.
But anyways, that's pretty much for my sermon, but I know there's gonna be some people eventually getting married in here, and some people who are already married, and we really need to, the Bible does place a great importance on marriage. I mean, he uses the church as the bride, and him as the groom.
And those
So it tells you there's a great emphasis on that, and that the wives should submit, meaning, and not being not being like a slave.
Yeah.
That's not the point.
Yeah.
Some people take that wrong. And the husbands are the ones who cherish their wives, who will give up anything for their wives, just as Christ did.
And those who, there may be some among us who are not married now or will never get married here. And that's not a bad decision either.
No, it is
Paul
not.
affirms that. Some who have no choice, like Stan mentions. But, you know, those who never do get married, or who aren't married, or are unmarried now, you know, can support those who are in marriage.
That's correct.
You know, and I think that's an important thing, that because it supports the family and Satan's attack. Two institutions that God has made,
Yeah.
the Sabbath and
Yeah.
marriage. And the
Yeah.
first one that God made wasn't the Sabbath, it was marriage. And so marriage is a really
Very, very important.
very important. So that even those who make that choice or don't have a choice to get married can still support the institution of those who are involved in that, and to support their decisions
And
that
the
way.
principles that are involved in marriage, of course, carry out of it too. Because it isn't just husbands and wives who submit one another.
Right,
Right? The Lord tells us to do that in the church.
right, to one another.
And the idea of living in peace with one another,
Right.
it's not supposed to just be in the
Don't pick a
household.
fight.
It's not supposed to carry outside the household. As far as, what's it say? It says as far as possible,
Yeah.
as lieth within you,
Yeah.
live in peace with all men, or be at peace with all men.
Actually, for the church, he says to agape, love. The whole world will know us, that we are followers of Jesus Christ for the love that we have one for another.
That's right.
And that's agape. And if you do that, everything else is a byproduct.
Amen.
Francis, can we have closing prayer for us?
Father, we thank you so much this morning for all you did to us, all that you've done for us, most of all, the giving of Jesus on the cross for us, that we might have life in his name, have it abundantly. We thank you also that as we discuss these characteristics and blessings in marriage, that we thank you especially that you have told us collectively as a church that you're married to us. And we ask, Father, that you would remind us often that we are married and that we do have one to be faithful to, one who is always faithful to us. So we ask you in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Thank you.